Welcome to the Reduce Cyber Risk Podcast, April 8th, 2019, episode 32. Welcome to the Reduce Cyber Risk Podcast, where we provide you the training and tools you need for your cybersecurity career. Hi, my name is Sean Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide you the information you need to grow your cybersecurity knowledge while taking practical and actionable steps to protect your business from the evil hacker horde. All right, let's get going. Hey, y'all, welcome to Reduce Cyber Risk, and in today's great podcast, we've got some awesome things that have occurred within the cybersecurity space. I've got three great cybersecurity news items that will be coming out that have actually hit the streets this week that can give you some guidance around the cybersecurity business protection aspect, as well as helping you train for your cybersecurity training programs that you might be working on. And also we're going to be talking about the Global Cybersecurity Alliance Small Business Cybersecurity Toolkit. Yeah, that's a lot to say, but it's a really cool toolkit that we've mentioned before in the previous podcasts that I kind of going to go a little bit more in depth on it and understand a little bit what it can do for you, especially if you're a small business. And if you're a security professional who is looking to protect a small to medium-sized business, it's a great place to start as well, as well as the Reduce Cyber Risk training that we have at the reducecyberrisk.com. So yeah, got to put a shameless plug in there as well. But bottom line is it's going to be some really good stuff that's going to help you with your company, especially if you're looking to protect it. Okay, the first training or the first piece that's in the cybersecurity news that we've got today comes from Graham Cluley, and this kind of talks about the recent breach that happened at Norsk Hydro. And if you give you a little background about this, there was a recent ransomware outbreak that had hit a manufacturing company or chemical company in the aluminum industry. And basically it hit the largest aluminum producer in the world. And this is a company called Norsk Hydro. Now, Norsk Hydro didn't have much of they had things in place, but at the end of the day, like many manufacturing companies, they had equipment, they had systems that are old and antiquated and outdated, i.e. 2003, Windows XP, so on and so forth. Well, they had a version of Locker ransomware got in there. I think it's Locker Gyro. Can't remember the actual name of it, but basically it got into their environment and it started locking things up for them. And what ended up happening is the CEO had just started like the day prior, and then this occurred. And what had ended up happening is they embraced the situation that they were in, which is kind of atypical of the current mantra around getting a ransomware attack, in that most people kind of run and hide and then pay the ransom, or just trying to say, we don't want to talk about it because it'll affect shareholders and so forth. Well, they did the opposite. They basically embraced the situation, told the extortionists to go and pack sand and said, we ain't paying you, and then ended up coming out with basically a PR campaign of saying what they were doing, how they were, and they communicated this to everybody, of how they were going to handle the situation. And by being a proactive approach, one of the comments that I read earlier, I think last week, a week before last, is that their share prices actually went up because of this situation. And they basically took a headlong approach in how do we deal with this immediately and how do we protect our company, but at the end of the day, just say that it's screwed up, we got to fix it. So what they also did was they flew in experts from other places around the world to help them get this situation under control. So they hired incident response people to help them with the problem. And this kind of falls in line with something I would recommend, that if you are a medium-sized company, small companies might have a hard time with this, but at a minimum, if you're a medium-sized company to a large enterprise, you may want to consider having an incident response process on retainer. And I know you're paying insurance for that, is basically what it comes down to, and it can get expensive. However, in the event that something bad happens, the last thing you want to be trying to do is negotiate contracts with a company to come in and help fight the fight for you. So I highly recommend that you consider that. Talk to your legal team and your compliance folks, but to potentially come up with a plan around hiring a third party as on retainer in the event that there is an incident. The other thing that they did that was kind of interesting was they were very transparent in their communications around webcasts. They put out webcasts and they talked about the situation and how they're going to be going through it. They also sent out email communications to people. So they were very interactive with the individuals, and they gave status updates. And I think it's a great idea, really do. In so often cases, especially if you're a public company, you don't want to bring that information up because you're afraid of it's going to affect the valuation of the company. But in the case of this, especially with the new GDPR rules that are in place and having to notify on breach response, I think taking a proactive approach, because you're going to be judged in the court of public opinion. And so then you got to ask yourself if and when you have to go to some sort of legal issues around this when it's all said and done. I personally believe that this will bode well for them in the fact that they did everything they could to address the issue. I don't know if they really had much of an incident response plan at the time, but I think they took a smart approach to how they want to handle it. And so they basically were just kind of being very proactive with it. The other key nugget that we mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago in the podcast was around Office 365. Because Office 365, their email was in the cloud, they did not have their servers internally compromised. So they were able to communicate with people without having to worry about that system going down. So that, I think that's a really big nugget there, is the more we can have that redundancy in the cloud, I think it's a great option. So just something to consider. But again, this was kind of out of Graham Cluley. It's 2 weeks later, kind of circle back around to see how things were going. They still are not at 100%. Obviously, this is going to take some time, especially when you have these older systems that are in your environment. But I think it took down like 161 sites, something like that, is what ended up getting impacted at some form, shape, or another. So it's a pretty huge endeavor by Norsk Hydro. Again, ransomware response, have an incident response plan, exercise your incident response plan, and be upfront and communicative with people around it. Okay, another one is around the 540 million Facebook users were exposed. Now, that's a lot of people. I mean, you consider that. That's a huge number of people. Now, I know online there's like 1.6 billion Facebook users or something crazy like that. So is 540 million a lot? Yeah, it's like a fourth of them, or maybe like a sixth of them, somewhere right around there. Bottom line is that there was a lot of people exposed. So what happened? Well, this came down to a third party who took this information from Facebook. Obviously, they used that information to help targeting and advertisers. Took this third party and did not do a good job protecting it. And like what we've talked about, a reduced cyber risk, especially as you're dealing with the Amazon, the AWS cloud, here's the part that scares most security professionals and practitioners, is the cloud. It's awesome. I love the cloud. I think it's great. It's a great opportunity for people to be able to use a product it's more flexible. It scales well. The challenge is how do people secure it? And in many cases, as they're running so fast to the cloud, people are not paying a whole lot of attention to how do you protect it. And your exposure now has gone up substantially because, let's just use this example as there's a database that has 540 million users in it. Now, typically in the old days, this database would be in the United States. I shouldn't say in the United States, but in a data center. And if it's in the data center, you have your perimeter that would protect you from that exposure. And so therefore, people could still get access to it, but there'd have to be a few more things that would have to fall down before people would get access to these records that are sitting in a database inside your data center. Now, fast forward to Amazon AWS. Your data center now goes to the cloud. Well, still, you can have plenty of protections in place, mechanisms to keep people from getting access to the data. However, because it's so easy to spin up and so quick to use, and it doesn't take a lot of training to be able to do this, what ends up happening is people are spinning up instances, in this case an S3 bucket, that's spun up and set up in place. And so therefore what's happening is they're not putting the proper protections to guard the information. Because they just spin it up, they're good to go, and they throw data in it. And so therefore what ends up happening is now you have exposure that you wouldn't have necessarily had internally to your company. Another dynamic to that is it's so simple to do, anybody can do it. In the past, you'd have IT help you with it, so there's multiple people involved. Takes time, lots of barriers to entry, so on and so forth. Well, now that the marketing guy can spin one up, not saying that's a bad idea, it's a good idea, honestly, but the marketing guy needs to have some basic knowledge, and IT needs to circle back around and make sure that it's done correctly. And so basically that's what ended up happening. And they had a S3 bucket that was set up in place, and they were dumping data into it. So the third party was at fault. Facebook supposedly was not at fault, but their data was exposed. And it was from a company called Cultura. See, okay, so I think it's Hispanic, and I can't say Espanole. Collectiva. And this is a Mexican media company that had their usernames, comments, likes, relationships, etc., etc. So it had a lot of different little things in there that were tied to the individual. Now, some people may say, well, usernames, comments, okay, well, that's bad. That's some exposure of data. The challenge is now is that especially if you're talking GDPR, they consider in many cases an IP address to be user data. So some individuals may say, yeah, so what? Others may be going, oh my gosh, this is bad. So keep that in mind. Any data that deals with personal identifiable information, depending on the country that you're in, can be a situation like this where it's a breach. Some countries may not care, but more and more countries are actually very concerned about their citizens and their privacy of their data specifically. So one of the things that's actually the scary part around this, not beyond just the fact that a gazillion Facebook users were exposed, was the fact that the company who discovered the issue, called UpGuard, not Upwork, but UpGuard, discovered and told Cultura Collective on January of 2019. Okay, so they told them 2019 saying, hey, you got issues with your bucket. So your bucket's got some holes in it. You might want to fill those things up and spray them with that stuff that you see the advertising, the commercials, that one dude that sprays his boat. He put a screen door in his bottom of his boat and sprays it with that goopy stuff to plug all the holes. They need to spray their bucket. So basically he told them you need to spray your bucket because your bucket's got holes in it in January of 2019. And guess what? Nothing. Crickets. 5 days later they went back and contacted them again. Nothing. Crickets. And then finally Bloomberg contacted Facebook, and it got taken down as of yesterday, April 3rd, 2019. So that's I want to say. Obviously, you can tell I'm recording this a little bit early, okay? But basically, that's what happened. And so they did not do a good job of maintaining their information, even after reasonable disclosure from UpGuard saying, hey, you guys have got an issue. Now, who knows what happened with Cultural Collective? They could have been running behind the scenes trying to figure out who set up this S3 bucket and how do they fix it. But I don't think it takes 4 months to do that. I think that they just basically said, yeah, talk to the hand. We don't really care. So that could be interesting because now Cultural Collective will be interesting to see how the court of public opinion affects them, and if lawsuits are brought up against them. I would expect there probably will be, just because you got 540 million Facebook users' data has been exposed. Who knows? Probably some of mine is on there. Not that I use Facebook, but it's who knows, right? That's a lot of people. So I expect there'll be probably some lawsuits coming, and then they'll use this as evidence of going, yeah, you guys didn't do nothing about it. Why not? So interesting part around that. Next one is a Verizon phishing scam, and they focused on a mobile-first approach. So what does that really mean? Well, as we all know, that most people are using their cell phones or smartphones on a daily basis. The actual desktop that people use in computer or in businesses and at home and whatever is going away in many cases. A lot of it's going to the online or the mobile options for your phone. I mean, cameras are there, your video is there, it's all there. I record this on a desktop though, nonetheless, just because it's a little bit easier to deal with. But it can be done on your phone, right? So what happened was Verizon was basically the target of a customer phishing campaign. And this is nothing new. This isn't anything we've ever really focused on. However, the key part, and this is where I come back to my red teaming days, it's all about the intelligence. And I've always said this, if a smart guy, a smart group of hackers did the intelligence on their target, they would be extremely successful. But in most cases, most hackers don't want to spend the time doing that because it takes time, right? And they just want to just throw stuff out there and then just hope. Basically, it's like dropping dynamite into a lake and just seeing what fish float to the top. Not that I've ever done that, but people do that. yeah, people from Kansas can do that. Yeah, we used to use M80s. They were just like little firecrackers, and it was kind of cool. They would just do a big kaboom, and then you'd have a couple fish that would possibly float up to the top. But that was when I was younger and very inexperienced and not very nice. So things have changed since I've gotten older. But anyway, back to digressing. The squirrel has come back. Mobile first approach, and what they've said that is they've optimized phony sites for mobile devices. And so therefore, they feel that whoever was involved with this had an understanding of Verizon's infrastructure, and they knew how Verizon is interacting with people. Now, I say that, and I don't mean to downplay that this article or about that they're actually start targeting mobile first. But if you think about it, they just did enough research to know how does Verizon reach out to their people. So they probably are Verizon customers or were at one point in time. And how would they reach out to them on financial aspects? Then what they would do is they would focus on what are the key domains that they use. And in this case, they use the abbreviation of ECRM, which in of itself seems, what does that mean, right? That doesn't mean anything. So they use that as a subdomain of ECRM, which is their subdomain of Verizon. They used a similar type domain to mimic what Verizon had. And it's basically what it is. It's an electronic customer relationship management platform. So it's a subdomain off of the Verizon website is ECRM. Well, the thing is that comes out of that is you would have to know what that actually stands for. So if you're a customer, you come in, you see I have some payment stuff, and then you'll see Verizon, you'll go ecrm.verizon.com, right? Well, ECRM is their electronic customer relationship management platform. Okay, that's what ECRM stands for. But the hackers, and I don't know what they actually never did say what they use, but it could have been EDRM or EBRM. And the whole point of it is that you would just kind of do a quick look at that and you'd go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I've seen that before. I've seen something similar to that before. And so they just made their subdomains match up to EDRM Verizon with a typo squatting kind of, I don't know, with the SON, and then people would buy into it. So the ultimate goal is they did intelligence. They tailored their specific attack based on what Verizon does now, and they targeted people that are Verizon customers. The other key point around that is they used a sense of urgency, and they changed. Basically, it's this. You see this all the time, right? And I use a sense of urgency to reduce cyber risk, right? You get your free deal. But bottom line is you will change to a payment schedule. Your payment has changed. You are delinquent in your payment. All of those things are to create a sense of urgency so that you will react, and you just don't go, yeah, talk to the hand. So that's what happened. And that's a typical phishing scam, right? You create this sense of, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. The IRS is coming to collect my home. You name it, right? And it works. It is as goofy and as ludicrous as it sounds, it works. And people buy into it because they feel like they're going to miss out on something or they're going to be in trouble. You better deal with it now, right? So those are aspects that they use on their phishing scam. Bottom line to take away from this is that they are now going away from utilizing the aspects of the desktop, which 70% of most people utilize their smartphone to access the web, and they're targeting more on mobile first. And they're gathering intelligence, and they're targeting you based on their intelligence. So the scammers are getting better. They're getting much better, and it's going to be a continuous problem. As long as there's money involved, the scammers will be trying to steal your money, period. All right, now that we've rolled out of the security news for the week, we're going to roll into some of our training. And this training is going to be around the Small Business Cybersecurity Toolkit that was put together with the Global Cybersecurity Alliance, which is GCA, and MasterCard. And this falls into line. We first got introduced to this when I did the podcast around PCI DSS. It was the last couple of weeks. And the cool part about all of this was that this toolkit came out recently, and they realized the same thing I've been saying forever with reduced cyber risk is the fact that small and medium-sized businesses do not have a good cybersecurity repertoire. They don't have a lot of people they can go pick from. And hence, that's why reduced cyber risk has also come up, is to teach and train people on cybersecurity, business professionals, as well as cybersecurity practitioners on some of the aspects they need to do to protect their companies. Well, they came up with this small business cybersecurity toolkit, and it's pretty cool. So we'll just kind of roll right into it. And what they came up with is a joint initiative between GCA and MasterCard, and the quote is it's quote, ... It goes beyond broad guidance in giving them very specific instructions presented, okay? Bottom line is it's designed to give you some direction versus just saying this big plethora strategic view, giving you some real hardcore things you can actually use to protect your company and to protect your small business. This is from Alexander I'm just going to goof his name up. It's Niegelow, Niegelow. See, my first name was Sean, S-H-O-N, Sean. That's about as good as my phonetic can be, right? Or actually language. See, third grade education kicking in. And he's a senior vice VP of cyber coordination at MasterCard. Now, they also received additional guidance from the National Cybersecurity Center, which is in the UK, which is spelled really cool, C-E-N-T-R-E, right? This is an English lesson. You never thought you'd get that on a podcast. But there's a National Cybersecurity Center from the UK and the Australian Cybersecurity Center as well. And they took their findings and then what they've learned from best practices from those institutions, as well as the PCI DSS and what MasterCard had helped them kind of establish. And you'll notice that many of the requirements on PCI DSS will fit well within what they've put together with this toolkit. So it's kind of dual purpose. Now, it's built for small and medium-sized businesses, and their goal was to affect dry cleaners up to truck drivers. It could be anybody who has a small business. And their point of this is that you guys, whoever might, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're a small business owner, you maybe have one of the smartest people in the room, probably most likely, because business owners, they got to be really smart to be able to make stuff happen in today's world. And cybersecurity stuff is just absolutely, yeah, right. Why would I want to deal with that? So the point of it is we have reduced cyber risk to help you with that. And the second is this toolkit. And I think it's really valuable in that space. So and what they also wanted to point out is that cybersecurity is not your comparative advantage. What it means is if I were to compare you as a dry cleaner and me as a dry cleaner, yeah, you would win. Whoever Mr. Dry Cleaner, I would lose. So your comparative advantage is in dry cleaning. Mine is in cybersecurity. So therefore, let us partnership together. And that's why the GCA wanted a partnership as well. Their goal is to affect 1 million businesses in 1,000 days. And this comes from Phil Rittinger. Yeah, he's probably goofed up his name too. He's the president and CEO of CGA, which is the it's GCA. I guess it's a typo. It's GCA, the Global Cyber Alliance. All right, so how is this working? Well, they base it off of a framework, and we've talked about frameworks as well. There's a podcast out there, Understanding Frameworks, and you can also see some of the video I've got on reduced cyber risk around building out a framework. And this one here, they've used a similar type of situation, but some of the frameworks out there is the Cybersecurity Framework, ISO 27001. There's multiple others. There's the 800-53, I believe, is NIST. But the Center for Internet Security, is the CIS, has a framework. And that's basic CIS controls, foundational CIS controls, and organizational CIS controls. Now, when you look at this, and we're going to go through each of these controls, a thing to keep in mind is that it follows very closely to other frameworks that are out there. And the cybersecurity framework that is in place right now, the CSF, which was the critical infrastructure framework, it follows a lot of those lines. Now, if you're just tuning in, and one of the things you're probably asking yourself is, what is a framework? Is that something that you put a building up with? No, it does not hold up anything of rafters or roofs. It is designed for, basically, it's guidance. It's like a checklist. It tells you what you should consider when protecting your company. And so, therefore, that's a framework. It's step-by-step instructions on what to do. Now, in the case of a large enterprise, that framework may not be quite so simple, so therefore you have to do a little bit of massaging to make it fit what you want it to do. But at the end of the day, it's designed as milestones, guideposts, checklists, whatever you want to do to help you at least make the right choices as you're moving forward. So again, basic focuses on inventory and control of hardware assets. I mean, they're just going to give you one little bullet of each because they've got a laundry list of bullets, since the dry cleaner's laundry. No, just joking. That one is inventory and control of hardware assets. That's under the basic. Malware defenses is under a foundational, and then organizational is application software security. And those are just main bullets that we've got on each of those. And bottom line, though, is every one of those you will find in other frameworks, and they're extremely valuable and important, especially in today's world, as the whole landscape is changing and getting much broader. I just had to deal with something recently where I was dealing with Amazon AWS and how the terminology is so challenging for some people, and also many people understand bits and pieces of AWS. The challenge, and that includes myself, the challenge is that sometimes I know more than I really think I do, or actually the other way around. I think I know more than I actually really do, and so a lot of assumptions are made, especially in terminology, and therefore it can potentially leave open holes, which we've talked about on the podcast, that AWS is a great tool. However, yeah, it could also get you in some serious trouble pretty quick. So the challenge is that this is what these frameworks are designed to kind of help work you through that. Now, we're going to kind of go through the toolkit itself and just kind of a breakdown. I recommend, I'll have the links in the show notes of where you need to go to get the toolkit, and you could Google it as well. You'll find it. But bottom line is that it's broken into different subcategories, and these subcategories have got actual tools that you can use that will help you in your business, and some of them are policies, and we'll kind of go into those. But basically, there's six main buckets. Know what you have. Update your defenses, beyond simple passwords, preventing phishing and viruses, defend against ransomware, and protect your brand. Every one of those is extremely valuable, whether you have an enterprise or you have a small business. And this is a really good way for you to kind of, especially if you have a small company, to get the same level of cybersecurity poo that you would get with a big company. So again, I think it's really helpful, especially if you don't understand these kind of information. So the first one is know what you have. So as you're looking at the basics, it's going to come down to identifying devices and identifying your applications. It's a foundational piece to this, or I should say basic, because it's under the basics bucket. But it's very basic in that fact that if you got to know what systems you have in your environment to protect them. Same with your applications. If you don't know what you have, it's really hard to protect something you don't know exists. And it can open you up to a lot of risk. So it's identifying your devices, and it's doing an inventory with both devices and applications. What you're going to find out when you do that is you're going to have probably a lot of old stuff that really needs to be updated, or you need to figure out what you want to do with it. Turn it into a brick, or I don't know, a shooting gallery, kind of pull out a gun and blow it away. I don't know. You do something. But bottom line is you're going to have to figure that out. Now, the tools they have in place, there's USB use policy, which is great. It's a policy. It's an initial policy on how to build out for a USB usage. Now, you're going to want to make more policies, especially if you're a business owner looking at this. You're going to want to have a couple other policies in place there, but it's a good way for you to get started. There's also a manage engine hardware and software inventory tool. There's an open audit inventory product, and the Spiceworks inventory tool, which is for devices and applications. So they got a plethora of options for you to get and manage the inventory of what's in your environment. And so you can go out and buy expensive tools to do this for you that may give you a little bit more granularity than these. I haven't tested them, but I'm assuming that they give you what you need to know. But if you're a small, medium-sized business and you're kind of operating on the least amount of capital expenditures as you can, this is a great way for you to get started. You may in the future want to add something else to your inventory, but it's a great place to get going. Now, update your defenses. Now, there's the basics around this, and it's basically updating your systems, updating your apps, implement security settings, and securing your websites. So now, if you did step one and you figure out what you had, you figure step two is you start looking at how do you update your system. So how do you get your poo from being exposed, right? That's important to make sure these things are updated. Now, you're going to find out from your inventory that you may have some really old poo, like I mentioned before, and you're going to go, what am I going to do with this thing? So you're going to have to make some decisions when you update those systems and or those applications. You may have some really old applications that you just can't update anymore. So then you're going to have to decide, are you going to accept the risk, or are you going to try to get a new system? What are you going to do? Bottom line, if you're listening to this podcast and you're interested in securing your company, you're probably going to want to look at investing in some things. You're just going to have to do it. You can get by on a shoestring for a while, but if you really want to protect your company, you probably need to invest a little bit of money and a little bit of time into it. The tools are also going to have a patching policy. Again, another policy, very good thing. And then auto-update software. So basically, they got links to how to auto-update for Android, iOS, Microsoft as well. And they have benchmarks, which are really good. They're just kind of like another little framework, but they're how do you set up the basic security configurations for your Mac, your Windows, and your mobile systems. It's not going to be all-inclusive. You can't get them all, but it's going to get you started. And the ultimate goal, just like the name of the podcast, reduce your cyber risk. It's supposed to reduce it. You're not going to get it to zero cyber risk. You're just going to reduce your cyber risk. So that's the whole point. And then manage your engine desktop central. It's got an area that you can actually centralized management console that you can manage your desktops. So all of these are really good tools. Enterprises pay big money for these things, and they're not scalable. So just so you know, these are not the kind of things you can scale up in a large-scale company. You'll want to invest in different tools for that. But they give you the basics of what you need to protect your business. Now, beyond simple passwords. Okay, so we're talked about passwords numerous times on this podcast, and the one thing you want to focus on is strong passwords. I will argue with this with anybody who would wish to argue with me, and with my third grade education, I probably couldn't argue very long. But I'll just tell you this, username and passwords was a terrible idea, especially for managing everything. Because we all know everybody reuses their passwords, and everybody uses Monkey or like something else that might not be appropriate for a podcast. They use different things for their passwords. They also have, we want to focus on how do you make a strong password, multi-factor, two-factor basics, how do you get into the multi-factor, like Google Authenticator and so forth. And then what are the tools for multi-factor? Okay, Google Authenticator is one, there's plenty of them out there. But they talk about those, and those are real easy to enable, and they have step-by-step instructions on how to do it. Some of the tools are out there is Have I Been Pwned by Troy Hunt. Very good site, especially if you've been compromised. And I think the recent email amount that was compromised was like 700 million or something crazy like that. So yeah, you've probably been pwned. Just nod your head up and down. Yep, you've been pwned. At least your email account is. Hopefully that's all. Authentication policies, another tool. Password reuse training. I know, why do we not do password reuse? Okay, that's not a good thing. Password reusing is not a good thing, just so you know. Strong password training. Utilize tools that are out there like LastPass, Password Generator, and so forth. Multi-factor training, multi-factor authenticator tools. So how do you use multi-factor, and then what are the tools you can use to enable multi-factor on your accounts? Some really good stuff, and this is really good, especially for passwords. Prevent phishing and viruses. Bum, bum, bum. Phishing's good, but not with a PH. So, basics, DNS security. We're going to get into DNS security, and they go into how the importance of that. And that's your domain name service security. Around, you've got reducecyberrisk.com, and what is the security around that? Antivirus, ad blockers, and so forth. So, all those main things that you deal with from a internet kind of stuff, right? And they got a phishing policy. They've got and they also recommend antivirus, which would be Zone Alarm, which I haven't heard about in years, Microsoft Defender, and so forth. Now, my belief on antiviruses, AV, they're a little bit of a placebo. They're a little delayed. I do like Microsoft's Defender because they basically use the Hive approach with their Windows devices to help give you a little bit more real-time capability. But antivirus, if you go out and buy it as an individual, yeah, it's better than nothing. So it's to help to prevent the stuff that's been around for a while, which is good. Especially if you have a lot of old stuff, that would be helpful. The antivirus is helpful, but you need more than just AV. But it's a good place to start. Not discounting it. It's a good place to start. Then they have ad blockers, which was for Firefox and Opera. So again, those are different web browsers that are there. But again, these are good areas around phishing and preventing viruses. Ransomware, on the other hand, yeah, that's just a different animal. But guess what? We're rolling into defending against ransomware. So the basics here they talk about is OS X backups and Windows 10 backups. So what they're basically saying is you're in trouble. You get ransomware, you're toast. And that's pretty much true. But if you have a backup in place, at least then you can restore from a backup. As long as your backup doesn't have ransomware in it, then you just back up the ransomware, and now you reinstall, and you've got ransomware once again. So those are things you need to consider. But it's a good place because the nice part about this is it helps you understand that you need a backup, especially on these critical systems. And it's one thing to consider. If you're a small or medium-sized business, you need to make sure you're backing up your critical systems. And if you are dealing with any sort of personal identifiable information, there are other compliance requirements around that, so you need to make sure that you're meeting those. So it's an important thing to do. The tools is OS X 10, which is your time machine backups, and Windows 10, their auto backups. So again, getting into the backup mantra, but that will help defend against the dreaded ransomware, which, by the way, is kind of on the rise, mainly for businesses. Oh, too bad. Sorry. All right, and then protecting your brand. So they had some interesting things around here, and this protects what is your company name, so company XYZ. So the basics are they implement the DMARC, okay, and understand DMARC reporting, and then trademark protection. So all of these are really important, especially to protect your company. If you are the best kitty litter disposal company in the world, and you have the brand as the best kitty litter disposal company in the world, you want to keep that because you don't want a third-rate person to come in and take over your brand, right? So the tools are out there is the GCA, which is from the Global Cybersecurity Alliance. They have a DMARC setup guide, so how you can do that. And to understand what DMARC is, honestly, I had forgotten about DMARC a little bit, and I had to go back and read and went, oh, yes, I forgot. But it's domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. Yeah, that's a long term, right? But basically what comes right down to is it states that if you're getting an email from an email server, can authenticate on any incoming email. So that DNS that comes in, it authenticates it and says, yes, it should be allowed in. So there's a really good way that you can utilize that. And they have the DMARC email authentication tool that's available called Demarcian. And it allows you to do that. So it'll help with the spoofing of any sort of emails. Is it 100% foolproof? No, but it's pretty good as far as DNS goes. So it will help get rid of a lot of chaff. And if you were to get, someone was to spoof that, basically what it comes down to is they're highly targeting you in a very specific way. There's DMARC, which is to stop email impersonation. And we've seen this numerous times. I've seen it, well, I used to do it. I used to basically impersonate emails. And you'd go from, I'm trying to think of a good name. I'm looking up right now. Okay, I've got a DBot, right? So I've got one of those in my house. So instead of DBot, the little automatic vacuuming machine, which is awesome, by the way, they went to Debotter, or Dbot with 2 T's, right? So then what's happening is Dbot.com is emailing you saying, hey, you haven't paid for your Dbot yet. That's email impersonation, right? ImmuneWeb phishing detection test basically, and that comes down to typo squatting and different phishing websites as well. So there's lots of email stuff in there. It's a really good tool set there. I would highly recommend you check that out. All right, so that is all I had is around the Global Cybersecurity Alliance Toolkit. We could probably have another podcast or maybe I'll put out some videos on YouTube on going through the different toolkit itself and just kind of what does it do, how would you click on it, what would you do with it, and so forth. And I'll probably do that, just a screen share that I put on YouTube around it. But it'll be good. It's really good for small, medium-sized businesses. It's a great place to start. But bottom line is you need to pay attention to it. You may not want to, but yeah, it's about 60 to 70% of what I've read of companies that do not have a plan around this and get hacked go out of business within the first year. So if you're a small business listening to this, you might want to pay attention to it because the simple fact of it is that if you don't, you could end up in a situation where you are probably sitting homeless on the street asking for money. Hopefully not that bad, but it could happen. So the references we had was Graham Cluley. He gave me some stuff around the ransomware and response of the Norsk Hydro. We talked about that as it related to the cybersecurity news. And also Locker Goga. I like Locker Goga, even though I couldn't say it during the podcast. It's Locker Goga. SC Magazine also had some great articles in there as well. You can the links are there for CIS Security, which is around the CIS framework, and then the Global Security Alliance, as well as SC Magazine and Dark Reading. Some really good stuff in that. All right, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It's been fun for me. You all have a wonderful day. If you have time, head on out to Reduce Cyber Risk. I've got some free stuff out there. If you're a business owner, there's free stuff for business owners. And if you're working on your CISSP certification, I got free stuff for you too there. So check it all out at ReduceCyberRisk.com. You can check me out also on Facebook and on Twitter. All right, have a wonderful day. We'll catch you on the flip side. See ya. Thanks so much for joining me today on my podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave a review, and as I would greatly appreciate any and all feedback. Also, check out my videos that are on YouTube. Just search for Sean Gerber, and you will find a plethora of content to help you secure your business. Lastly, head on over to Reduce Cyber Risk and look at all the free stuff that's available for our email subscribers. It's growing each and every day. Thanks again for listening. See ya!